Hollywood once had men who were considered the ideal mold of a gentleman. With deep, warm voices, hypnotic eyes, and flawless looks, they made millions of female fans swoon in the 1950s. But what few people knew was that to earn that spotlight, they had to pay for it with their very own bodies. Some were told to undress right there in a hotel room. Some served cocktails at midnight, but in truth, they were performing extended services. And some were secretly filmed, blackmailed, and forced to live their entire lives in silence, fearing their careers would collapse after a single leak. At least 25 of Hollywood's top leading men went through those humiliating exchanges. They were all A-list stars, faces once engraved on the Hollywood Walk of Fame. So who were they? Why did these A-list celebrities, men who seemed to have it all, have to sell themselves from the very beginning of their careers? Everything will be revealed in today's video. 1. James Dean, the Rebel Angel, and the Deals Made in the Dark. Hollywood, summer of 1951. James Dean, a 20-year-old boy freshly arrived from Indiana to Los Angeles, had no connections, no money, and no auditions lined up. The only things he had were a strange, haunting face and a kind of innocence that was easy to control. That was exactly why he caught the eye of the secret talent scouts at the Chateau Marmont Hotel, a place once nicknamed the after-hours casting office for the industry's most powerful men. According to a bartender who worked the ground floor bar, Dean once attended a private party where young men weren't called by their real names, but by numbers. Dean was number 6. He had sad eyes and messy curls. People liked him a lot. But most of all, he was quiet, didn't ask questions, didn't fight back. One of the first people to bring Dean out of the shadows was Rogers Brackett, a seasoned theater director from New York. Brackett wasn't just a lover, he was a sponsor. But the price Dean had to pay was steep. According to actress Christine White, who lived near Brackett's apartment at the time, I used to hear Dean crying in the bathroom at 3 a.m. more than once. But the next morning, he'd still show up on set looking like nothing had ever happened. Dean's career began to rise after a string of on-demand visits. He was escorted to upscale parties, serving cocktails, and other services not listed on the menu. On one occasion, he was asked to spend the night with an older investor in exchange for a television role on CBS. Dean didn't say no. He knew that if he could just get on screen, he wouldn't have to wash dishes anymore at that diner near Sunset Boulevard. In fact, according to a late close friend, Dean was once secretly filmed in a Wilshire Boulevard penthouse while privately entertaining a studio executive. That tape later became leverage, ensuring Dean never dared to break away from the web of power wrapped around him. From that point on, Dean's life was no longer his own. What he wore, where he went, who he dated, everything was arranged by a group of unnamed faceless handlers. Many believe that this very group was the reason Dean became increasingly withdrawn, cold, and suspicious, like someone who thought he was being watched every single day. Dean traded his body for fame, but what he received wasn't lasting glory. After just 3 breakout performances, he died forever in a mysterious car crash in 1955, right when his career was only beginning. 2. Marlon Brando, the man who would sleep his way into a role. Brando once declared bluntly at a press party in 1975, "I slept with anyone who could give me a part. Male or female, it didn't matter, as long as they had power." This quote was later cited by Vanity Fair in a 2001 special dossier on Brando, serving as living proof of the true dark side of American cinema. Back in the 1940s, Brando was hustling on small New York stages. An aging director named George Cukor bought Brando for $300 a week in exchange for late-night private line rehearsals in his Beverly Hills luxury apartment. It was Cukor himself who later phoned Elia Kazan to recommend Brando, leading to his legendary casting as Stanley Kowalski in A Streetcar Named Desire. But Brando didn't stop at one man. He slept with directors, producers, even reporters, as long as they could get him closer to the spotlight. In a leaked personal diary found after his death, Brando listed 14 men who had helped him with both body and money. One of them was none other than Jack Warner, the tycoon behind Warner Brothers, who once rescued Brando from a sex scandal in 1953, so he could go on to star in Julius Caesar. But not everyone was as lucky as Brando. There was one man, once mentored by Brando, who entered the same shadowy rooms, but never came back out. 3. Sal Mano, the star, murdered by a past he couldn't bury. Sal Mano, the handsome actor who played James Dean's best friend in Rebel Without a Cause, was a star that rose fast and fell even faster. Behind the spotlight was a past he was never allowed to speak of. In 1955, at just 16, Sal was invited to the private home of a famous producer for a personal dialogue session. He later told a friend, "They said I'd get the part if I could convince them I was soft enough." That night, Sal stayed. The next morning, his name was on the official audition list for Rebel. Sal never denied it. In a 1973 TV interview that was cut from broadcast, he said bluntly, "In Hollywood, if you don't satisfy them, they won't remember your name." After Dean's death, Sal spiraled. He was used, discarded, and eventually turned to selling himself as a way to survive. At one point, according to The Advocate, Mano had exclusive arrangements with 2 directors in Palm Springs, trading sexual favors for minor roles in B movies. By the late 60s, Sal tried to reclaim his career. He directed plays, joined independent art projects, and began speaking out about Hollywood's hidden horrors. A week before his murder, Sal told a CBS reporter, "I've got names, photos, tapes. If something happens to me, go find them." On February 12, 1976, Sal Mano was stabbed to death outside his apartment in West Hollywood. Police ruled it a robbery, but his wallet remained untouched. His watch was still on, and his briefcase, rumored to contain all the evidence he was about to expose, vanished. Sal Mano's death is a reminder: some truths will kill you before the audience ever hears them. And among those who once stood beside him, who came from the same shadows, was another star, more beautiful, more famous, but who spent his life in denial and constant fear that the truth about his identity might be revealed. 4. Rock Hudson, the gentleman escort behind closed doors. Rock Hudson wasn't just a Hollywood icon. He was the premium gift at parties no fan was ever invited to. As early as the 1950s, when he was just a young hopeful at Universal Rock, was placed on the list of high-potential pretty boys by Henry Wilson, the most powerful manager in Hollywood at the time, famous for training actors straight from the bedroom. Hudson had a chiseled physique, a cinematic face, and a deep, seductive voice. But it wasn't talent that got him chosen. In a studio memo leaked in 1989, one of Wilson's former assistants had handwritten, "He's obedient, discreet, and always ready to accompany clients if I nod." They called Hudson the perfect companion. He never asked who he was meeting, never said no. From the Beverly Hills Hotel to Palm Springs Estates, Hudson always arrived with a polite smile, poured drinks, made charming conversation, and if needed, walked into a bedroom without another word. A recorded phone call between Wilson and producer Ross Hunter, later published in Full Service by Scotty Bowers, once revealed he can handle 2 people a night as long as no one takes pictures. Other than that, as long as they want. When Hudson became a sensation with Pillow Talk and Magnificent Obsession, he was not just the media's darling, but also the most expensive asset in secret fundraising parties hosted by film moguls. Rumors swirled that every time Hudson showed up at one of these exclusive party studios secured millions in underground investments from wealthy backers. No one knows how many people he actually slept with. But after his death, a crumpled note was found with a haunting scribble: "I was never allowed to say no." And yet, he was not alone. His old companion, a man once seen as Hollywood's golden gentleman, had also lived that way, just with more silence and more secrecy. 5. Carrie Grant, the perfect gentleman, and the nights spent surviving off strangers. The 5th name on the list is Carrie Grant, the man once hailed by the press as the husband every woman dreams of. But the truth lay on the opposite end of that fantasy. For nearly 2 decades at the start of his career, Grant lived with actor Randolph Scott, a relationship that magazines at the time curiously described as inseparable companions. At their Malibu Beach mansion, the pair hosted private parties for directors, screenwriters, and studio financiers gatherings where, according to Scotty Bowers, the famed male escort matchmaker of the elite, Carrie Grant, didn't just entertain, he orchestrated behind-the-scenes exchanges. On one occasion, as recounted by a cinematographer, Grant invited 3 directors to his home, then disappeared with them into a locked second-floor room. A week later, he landed the leading role in Bringing Up Baby. It didn't stop there. A leaked memo from Columbia Pictures in 1942 mentioned Grant's complete compliance with after-hours studio-arranged activities, including support for the studio's key financial partners. Even after becoming a household name, Grant couldn't or wouldn't step away. Confidential magazine once investigated a 1955 incident where Grant was spotted leaving the Biltmore Hotel at 2 a.m. alongside an anonymous European backer just days before signing on for To Catch a Thief with Hitchcock. Perhaps that's why he married 5 times, but never truly settled with anyone. And even as the tabloids swarmed, Grant never once responded, because he knew silence was the only thing that could keep him alive in a Hollywood full of traps. 6. Clark Gable, the king of Hollywood, once kept by men. The 6th man on this list is Clark Gable. Before he became the dashing Rhett Butler in Gone with the Wind, before he was crowned the King of Hollywood, Clark Gable was a young escort serving older men in Oregon. In 1922, at just 21 years old, Gable was kicked out of his home for dropping out of school and being jobless. With nowhere to go, he was taken in by William H. Wright, a prominent gay playwright of the era, under the label of stage apprentice. In truth, Wright took care of Gable's every need: clothes, food, shelter, even pocket money, in exchange for the young man's total obedience. A former neighbor of Wright recalled in a 1978 memoir, "Every Friday night, Mr. Wright would have guests. Clark would serve drinks with a smile and knew exactly when to slip away into the private room." After Wright's sudden death from a stroke, Gable moved to Los Angeles, bringing along the contacts of his former benefactor. According to internal MGM records, Gable was once bailed out by a major director from a gay scandal involving a male critic so he could still audition for The Painted Desert. That film was his gateway into Hollywood. Louis B. Mayer, the MGM mogul, once sneered, "Gable knows the price of a tux and the price you pay to wear it on the red carpet." Even at the height of fame, Gable maintained a murky relationship with George Cukor, the openly gay director of Gone with the Wind. Rumor had it Gable influenced Cukor's removal from the project, fearing the director might spill secrets from their shared past. But while Gable chose to bury his past, the next man on the list was the kind who would compromise every single night just for a chance to keep dancing on stage, even if that stage was a bedroom. 7S Gene Kelly, the dance legend, and his shadowy footwork. Before stardom, Gene Kelly was a dance instructor in Pittsburgh. In 1937, he moved to New York with 2 suitcases and a notebook filled with names of producers passed down from former students. One of the first he met was Charles Weidman, a well-known choreographer who brought him into a private training group that lasted 6 months, a covert sexual audition pipeline for Broadway producers. Another trainee later revealed in Movie Line magazine, "We didn't rehearse. We were judged by our bodies, our obedience, and our flexibility, both on stage and off." Kelly passed the screening and was recommended to director Stanley Donen, who would become both his longtime collaborator and, according to whispers, his secret lover for nearly a decade. Even after achieving fame, Kelly couldn't escape the grip. Studios pressured him into exclusive social engagements with investors. A former Variety journalist recalled Gene Kelly once danced the entire night at a Bel Air mansion. But there were no cameras, no stage, just 3 powerful men and a contract waiting to be signed. In a letter to a close friend in 1959, Kelly wrote, "They want me to dance for them. But no one ever asks if I'm tired, if I'm sad, or if I'm disgusted with myself." And maybe that's why, behind the stage lights, Gene Kelly always preferred rooms without mirrors, hallways without footsteps, and silent walks into the night. 8. Tony Curtis, the perfect face and the role paid in flesh. Tony Curtis was the embodiment of the Hollywood dream, strikingly handsome, sharply dressed, and a smile that silenced every casting room. But behind that polished surface, Curtis once whispered to a co-star, "To get roles, I've done things that weren't in the script." In 1948, a young man from the Bronx stepped into Universal's audition room. Within 5 minutes, an elderly producer looked him up and down and said, "I think you could be a star. But first, tell me, are you obedient?" That was not small talk. According to journalist Robert Hoffler, author of The Man Who Invented Rock Hudson, Curtis, once spent an entire week living in a casting director's private apartment in exchange for a role in Criss Cross 1949, the part that first caught the industry's attention. Curtis never denied those nights. In a 1990 interview that was later cut from broadcast, he admitted, "I knew exactly how to use my face. It was the most valuable thing I had when I was young." By the time he starred in Some Like It Hot, the press hailed him as the heartthrob of the century. But in his private journal, Curtis once scribbled, "If people knew what I did to get this role, they'd never think I was sweet again." 9. Anthony Perkins. Norman Bates and the Price of a Role. Anthony Perkins was once Hollywood's darling. With his dreamy eyes, tall, slender frame, and shy, delicate voice, he was the kind of man every director wanted to reshape in their own image. Before becoming Norman Bates in Psycho, Perkins wandered through New York, surviving through prearranged meetings at the Commodore Hotel. One of his regular clients was Roy Cohn, the era's most powerful attorney, who connected Perkins with media moguls looking for cultured, obedient boys to entertain their guests. An anonymous industry insider told Confidential magazine in 1965, Perkins was rare. He made people feel like they were the only one. In return, they gave him roles. It was Alfred Hitchcock himself who allegedly bought out Perkins from another studio with a contract rumored to include a secret clause requiring Perkins to remain intimately available throughout the production of Psycho. In unpublished letters to an ex-boyfriend revealed in 2007, Perkins wrote, "I'm not afraid to die for a role. I'm afraid people will find out how I had to die slowly to earn it." After Psycho, Perkins was typecast not just on screen, but in life. In 1972, he told a psychologist, "I'm no longer me, I'm a deal." A gift that was traded. 10. Dennis Hopper. The rebel who sold himself to stay in the game. Dennis Hopper. The embodiment of New Hollywood's wild spirit. A rebel draped in dust and defiance, was once a young idealist. But even he confessed, "I sold my soul for a supporting role and one night in Beverly Hills." In the mid-60s, Hopper hit rock bottom, blacklisted from major projects due to his reputation for violence, insubordination, and drug use. One night, he received an invitation to a private casting party in a Mulholland Drive mansion, where men like him could trade their bodies for a chance to return to the screen. According to director Nicholas Ray's memoir, Hopper gladly serviced an older financier all night in exchange for a small role in The Sons of Katie Elder, 1960, the role that put him back on Hollywood's radar. Hopper's ex-girlfriend, actress Brooke Hayward, once said Dennis would endure anything, even humiliation, if it meant stepping in front of the camera again. And the cost didn't end there. In a 1983 Rolling Stone interview, Hopper admitted, "I used to be a bastard, but before that I was a good boy, serving rich men just to do what I loved." But where is the line in these trades? Because the next man was once dubbed America's Golden Boy. Someone no one believed could fall. Yet his story proves that sometimes you don't sell yourself once. You sell yourself in pieces, night after night, until there's nothing left to keep. 11. Rudolph Valentino. The original Latin lover and knight sold for survival. Rudolph Valentino, Hollywood's first elegant heartthrob, was adored nationwide as the Latin lover. But long before women chased him, Valentino had to serve men just to survive. According to Emily Leiter's 2003 biography, Valentino worked as a waiter in New York before being fired for getting too friendly with male clients. He was then introduced to a secret male review club called Mickey, where wealthy men could rent a beautiful boy for the night, 50 per visit. An old acquaintance told the Brooklyn Eagle he didn't want to do it. But when someone threatened to call the police over his illegal residency, Valentino said yes. And every week someone came to take him home. It was one of those clients, producer Norman Carey, who eventually brought Valentino to California and helped land him a role in The Four Horsemen of the Apocalypse, 1921, the film that made him a star. But at what cost? In a handwritten note discovered after his death, Valentino once wrote, "The world calls me their lover. But the first night I lay still, no one kissed me at all." 12. Tyrone Power. Beauty that never came free in Hollywood. Tyrone Power was the face of American cinema in the 1940s. Women adored him, men envied him. But what no one knew was that Power learned early on beauty in Hollywood isn't a gift. It's currency. In 1936, before signing with 20th Century Fox, Power was invited to vacation in Palm Springs with an older producer, later named in FBI files, for hosting casting parties disguised as private retreats. A staff member told journalist William Mann Power was asked to try on swimwear. Then he was asked to try obedience. The very next morning, he got a 5-year contract. The story didn't stop there. For years, Power's calendar was filled by Hollywood elites sponsored when not on set. His appearances at Brown Derby nightclubs always came with whispers that he was paying debts with charm. His close friend actor Cesar Romero once said Tyrone knew that to stay where he was, he had to protect the image, even if the cost was never being allowed to tell the truth. But there were others like Montgomery Clift who couldn't protect that image because they gave up everything for fame and lived forever, haunted by the nights they had to lie down just to get their name on the casting list. 13. Montgomery Clift, the sorrowful eyes of a man who once sold his body. Montgomery Clift never smiled for long in front of the camera. His gaze always carried a quiet sadness, as if it didn't belong to this world. And that made sense, because this world Hollywood was a place where he once sold himself just to land a supporting role. According to diary entries left by Elizabeth Taylor Clift, once confided that, in his youth, a friend introduced me to a stage director to trade intimacy for a part. When Taylor asked if he regretted it, Clift simply said no. But every time I remember it, I feel like a part of me died. In 1945, before anyone knew his name, Clift agreed to a private audition at a Bel Air mansion where acclaimed director Joshua Logan was looking for a fresh face. After the session, Clift stayed there for 3 days. An elderly housemaid recalled in Clift the untold story. He cried a lot. But when he left, he had a contract in his hand. Even later, when fame came, Clift dodged every question about how it all began. Once, when asked by Variety, he answered, "I started in theater, and in a few rooms where no one was watching." He lived in loneliness, battled alcohol, and died with a crooked smile. No one knows what secrets he took to the grave. But a peer of his, once adored by an entire generation of schoolgirls, once confessed, "I lay down for someone I didn't love, just to live the life of a role I was never really chosen for." 14. Tab. Hunter, the teen idol. And the relationships no one could know. Next on the list is Tab Hunter. In the 1950s, no one outshone the golden glow of Tab Hunter, the bright smile, the chiseled frame, the all-American boy. But behind the idle facade was a truth Hunter had to bury for half a lifetime. In 1950, at just 19, Hunter was arrested at a gay party in Long Beach, a scandal that nearly destroyed his career. But a powerful, unnamed producer bailed him out, not with money, but with an exclusive 5-year contract. When asked about the scandal later, Hunter would only smile faintly and say, "I didn't lose anything, just had to stay the night with someone I couldn't say no to." Throughout his golden years, Hunter was forced into fake romance contracts with young actresses, Natalie Wood, Debbie Reynolds, all to cover up his real relationships. Later in his memoir, Tab wrote, "I wasn't chosen for my acting. I was chosen because I was willing to be quiet and beautiful in the way Hollywood needed." But Tab wasn't the only one living a double life. The next man made millions swoon as a TV doctor, but behind the camera, he was someone completely different. 15. Richard Chamberlain, the TV doctor and his double life. As Dr. Kildare in NBC's 1971 hit series, Richard Chamberlain was the dreamboat of millions. But behind the scenes, he lived in fear. Fear of exposure, fear of losing it all if just one intimate photo leaked. A former assistant told Hollywood Insider he never left the studio with his lover. All meetings happened at his private apartment, the windows always shut, the curtains always drawn, the phone always unplugged. Chamberlain was pressured into after-hours auditions held past midnight in Beverly Hills, where directors, producers, even journalists evaluated candidates not on performance, but on physical compliance. Once, he was asked to privately engage with a network executive before a new role was greenlit. When a male co-star once suggested going public, Chamberlain coldly replied, "If I lose this role because I love you, will you be able to feed me?" He wore the mask of the perfect gentleman for 40 years. Only after retiring did he dare admit the truth. But there were others like Troy Donahghue who never had time to even consider wearing a mask. 16. Troy Donahghue, the teen heartthrob and midnight casting parties. With his golden hair and surfer charm, Troy Donahghue was the national heartthrob of the 1960s. But when the lights went out, he didn't go home. He showed up at invitation-only parties where casting didn't happen in front of a camera, but behind closed doors. At one such gathering in 1958, at a Mulholland Drive estate, Donahghue was summoned into a room where director Jack Warner and 2 wealthy backers waited. A server present recalled. He came out 30 minutes later, face pale as a sheet. He hadn't been asked to act, just to let them see what he looked like without clothes. After that night, he was offered a 7-year contract with Warner Brothers. From then on, every appearance Donahghue made came with a price. In a leaked journal, he wrote, "Every time I appeared on screen, I had to erase a part of myself." After a few years, there was nothing left but the image they created. Donahghue spiraled into addiction, lost everything, and died in solitude in 2001. But at least he had his moment of fame. The next man wasn't even given that choice. He only had one mission: survive. 17. Van Johnson, the boy next door who traded his body for rent. Van Johnson was MGM's signature nice guy next door throughout the 1940s. But in real life, Johnson once slept on warehouse floors and borrowed money for food. When director George Cukor happened to spot him at a cheap diner on Melrose, he said something that brought Van to tears. "I don't need you to act. I just need you to behave." That night, Van was invited to Cukor's estate. They auditioned in the bedroom. The next morning, Johnson walked away with a real screen test and a stack of rent money enough for 3 months. Later, during a drinking session, Van confided to a friend, "I'm not proud of it, but I didn't want to go back to sleeping on park benches. Here, people don't ask who you are, they just ask, will you comply?" The boy next door became a star. But not all the stars, no matter how beautiful, ever escaped the shadow of those first nights they had to trade their bodies just to survive. 18. George Maharis, the TV hero. Undone by one headline. George Maharis was the golden face of early 60s television, famous for his role as Buzz Murdoch in Route 66. Handsome, rugged, masculine Maharis captivated women and made men jealous. But one November night in 1967, it all came crashing down with a single headline in the Los Angeles Times: TV actor arrested in public restroom for indecent conduct. The story was buried, but court records revealed Maharis had been caught in an intimate exchange with an undercover LAPD officer in the restroom of the Westwood Hotel. The scandal didn't just raise questions about his sexuality, it made the studios abandon him overnight. A former director who worked with Maharis once said everyone knew from the start he wasn't cast for his acting. He was beautiful, and he was obedient. After the scandal, Maharis vanished from the screen. He lived reclusively, avoided interviews, and never spoke of that night again. 19. John Gavin, the clean-cut face behind dirty encounters. John Gavin was known as the cleanest face in Hollywood by the end of the 1950s. With perfect looks, military polish, and charm to spare, he was the go-to actor for heroes, officers, and aristocrats. But what audiences didn't see was the list of strangers Gavin met outside studio hours. A former Universal Studios limo driver revealed in a quietly released 1984 memoir, Gavin was often driven to a Santa Monica apartment at midnight where men in tuxedos waited. No names, no questions. An hour later, he came out blank-faced and simply said, "Take me home, I need a shower." In return for these meetings, Gavin secured roles before scripts were even finished. No auditions, no questions. A Universal executive once admitted he was the perfect mask for the filth we were hiding behind the scenes. But at least Gavin survived. The next star, Rammon Navaro, wasn't so lucky. He died in the very bed he had once sold his youth and beauty to obtain. 20. Rammon Navaro, the silent film legend, who died on a stranger's bed. On October 31st, 1968, police found Rammon Navaro dead in his Laurel Canyon home. His throat was strangled with a phone cord mouth stuffed with tissue-dried blood all around. His killers were Paul and Tom Ferguson, two young hustlers he had called. Why? They believed Navaro was hiding money in the house. But the case turned darker when reporters uncovered a list of special clients Navaro had entertained from the 1930s to 1950s directors, politicians, and A-list stars. One of them confessed on the witness stand, "I met him when I was 17. He said, 'Just behave and I'll get you in a film.' And he did." Navaro survived by selling himself under fake names. But even as a legend, he died alone and disgraced just another body no one wanted to claim. In contrast, the next star fell into a trap, not of survival, but of love. A love the world refused to accept. And the price was a life lived entirely in the shadows. 21. Farley Granger, the innocent boy, and his lover in the dark. Farley Granger rose to fame with Hitchcock's Rope, 1948, charming audiences, with his soft features, dreamy eyes, and gentle presence. But behind that fragility was a life dominated by fear and desire. In 1950, Granger entered a consuming relationship with screenwriter Arthur Lawrence, a man who controlled every step of his career. In his memoir, Include Me Out, Granger admitted, "Arthur taught me how to love, how to pretend, and how to lie down when I needed to keep a role." The relationship lasted over 15 years, but no one in the industry dared speak of it. Every time Granger landed a new part, whispers followed, "Who did he sleep with this week?" A production assistant was once fired for joking about it on the strangers on a train set. Granger never confirmed, never denied. In one of his final interviews, he said, "I loved, I was used. But I don't regret it, because in this world, if you don't let them touch your body, they'll never let you touch the spotlight." 22. Don Murray, the silent face of unwritten deals. Don Murray isn't a name whispered in the same breath as the legends of his time, but he once made Marilyn Monroe blush on screen in Bus Stop 1956. With his dignified demeanor, steady gaze, and quiet charm, many believed Murray was the ultimate old-school gentleman. But behind that clean-cut image lay a past filled with deals that were never part of any script. According to the unpublished memoir of a casting assistant at 20th Century Fox, Don was once pressured into using his body in exchange for his first film contract. He went into a private audition with a major director. 2 hours later, he came out pale as a ghost. When I asked if he was okay, he whispered, "I think I just sold my soul to be seen through a lens." Murray never confirmed the story, but he never denied it either. In a 1982 interview, he offered a cryptic remark. "In Hollywood, some things are never written into contracts. But everyone knows what they have to do if they want their name on the dotted line. Unlike Murray, the next man wasn't silent. He was once America's favorite cowboy, and he served far more dinners than he did rolls. 23. Guy Madison, the silver screen cowboy who served dinner to the elite. With perfect teeth and matinee idol looks, Guy Madison was America's ideal man in the adventures of Wild Bill Hickok. But before the fame, he was just an unemployed Navy vet scraping by in Los Angeles. And what kept him afloat wasn't the studio lot, it was the kitchens of elite mansions. A former employee of the Beverly Hills Hotel, where tycoons frequently booked private dinners, revealed Guy was hired not just to serve food, but to be part of the decor. Guests would request him shirtless, standing still, like a statue for the first 20 minutes, then disappearing into the host's bedroom. An anonymous director wrote in a memoir, "Guy didn't mind. He was gorgeous and understood his role. I once saw him smile as someone handed him a room key, like it was a routine he'd rehearsed 1,000 times." Once stardom hit, Madison never mentioned those earlier days. But Hollywood never forgot, especially those who saw him in hotel bathrooms at 3 a.m. 24. William Haynes, the man who refused to bow but once sold his body to survive. William Haynes was MGM's most bankable romantic comedy star in the late 1920s and one of the very few openly gay men in classic Hollywood. But before he could live authentically, Haynes survived by quietly selling himself to keep both himself and his partner afloat. According to a 1933 issue of Variety, when Haynes was caught in a hotel with a young man, he didn't apologize. Instead, he told the press, "I love him. I won't give him up." But few knew that early in his career, Haynes worked in secret gentlemen's clubs, where entry required an invitation. A close friend recalled Bill once said, "I don't work there for money. I work there to be seen, to be introduced, to be chosen." After the scandal, MGM fired him. But Haynes reinvented himself as a legendary interior designer. Even so, near the end of his life, he admitted, "I don't regret loving. But I do regret having to sell that love just to buy back my career." Not everyone survived, like Haynes. One man didn't just sell his body, he brokered bodies for an entire generation of young men in Hollywood's shadows. 20. Scotty Bowers, the secret pimp of classic Hollywood. If anyone knew who slept with whom in classic Hollywood, it was Scotty Bowers. A former Marine, Bowers became the unofficial pleasure coordinator for the entire industry, starting from a humble gas station on Hollywood Boulevard. From 1946 onward, Scotty wasn't just pumping gas, he was introducing young men to VIP clients. Many were aspiring actors, unknown models, or recently discharged servicemen. In his memoir, Full Service 2012, Bowers recalled Rock Hudson, Carrie Grant, Spencer Tracy. They were all clients. I was just the middleman. He claimed to have arranged over 1,000 encounters over 3 decades and participated in more than a third of them himself. They came to me because they had no choice. They needed roles, they needed rent, they needed to survive. Scotty was never sued, never caught on tape, and when he died in 2019, He left behind a vault of names, hundreds of icons who once lay down just to stand under Hollywood's lights. So the male gods, who once made millions of hearts flutter, turned out to have also had to sell themselves in the dark just to get a chance to stand in front of the camera. The question is, has this stopped? Or is it still happening? More sophisticated, more secretive, and more dangerous. What do you think about the truth behind the spotlight? If you had the choice, would you choose to be true to yourself? Or trade everything for fame? Leave a comment below. And don't forget to subscribe to the channel today. Turn on the notification bell so you don't miss the upcoming